Decided I'm gonna end the year on a good note. This thing has been collecting dust for way too long, so I think it's time we build it. Disclaimer: I have already started to build this kit about a year and a half ago. I was invited to a build-off competition type thing on Facebook. Then the wife talked me into YouTube when the world quit spinning because I had nothing else to do. So here we are. Let's get back to this kit. Now I did state I've already started it. The engine has been built. It's just like every other engine, two halves glued together and just a bunch of extra parts added. Outside of the instructions, all I've really done is add some carbon to the coil covers and some cigarette pack foil stuff as a heat shield on the guide converters. Next up, we have some parts of the body. Now the front nose is something else I had already assembled. I've glued in the snorkel things here and the front nose piece and whatever that black thing is right there. Now outside of that, all I've really done is clean up all the flash and the mold marks just to get it ready for primer. I should also note that I've built the FXX kit, and it's basically the same thing, so I know a lot about this kit. Now next up we have the rear fenders. These are kind of a pain because you got to do a lot of masking to make them look right. The rear fascia is untouched, still on a screw. Next up, we still have a lot of parts that I haven't touched yet. Yay! Now this thing, if it's anything like the FXX, it's got a lot of pin marks and everything on the bottom. This one's actually not too bad. You could still see them, but they're pretty smooth. This little piece right here goes on the roof between the two doors. Also on the sprue we have our seats. Over here we have the mirrors and little interior accent pieces. I have no idea what those little things are. Other than that, we just have the doors, the little grill things for the front fenders. Moving on, we have some suspension and just other random body parts. I have cleaned up this, namely just painting the rear suspension section and cleaning up the door seals. They get carbon, so they have to be really smooth. Outside of that, the silver and the carbon door seals is the only thing visible on that entire piece. Those are kind of visible, but they're very well hidden. You got to be looking down through the engine to actually see them. As far as the sprue goes, we have the front suspension, which is not at all seen once assembled. Outside of that, we got a coolant tank, the gas cap door, and the crossover tube going from the radiators to the rear of the car. Next up, we have the rear suspension that is on full display in the engine bay. We have some heat exchangers, the fans for the front radiators, front suspension, and more radiators. Outside of that, we have the hinges for those weird scissor doors, the rear sway bar, and this piece, I'm not sure what that is. I do not remember it being on the FXX. Next up, we got just some other random odds and ends. Those two pieces right there I had taken off earlier, they make up the interior tub. I was going to clean them up and get some carbon templates going. On the rest of the sprue we have the rear firewall, and right above those we have the other parts of the door hinges. And those little bitty pieces, they go onto these little bitty pegs on the side of the chassis. They, and they alone, are what really just holds the front nose piece in place. Now those little pieces, I'm not sure why they are separate. They get painted black with the rest of the chassis. Finishing off the sprue, we have the little floppy paddles for the shifter, the rear strut tower braces. I'm thinking this is the prop rod for the rear bonnet. Next to that is the gauge cluster. Then our two pieces of our dash. I will be doing that in carbon, so I am glad it is in two pieces. Above that we have the steering wheel and the steering column, which is free of sink marks. Take notes, new plats. Take notes. Here we have the intake ducts for the rear heat exchangers. Below that we have the headlight buckets. Right next to them are the door sills for the bottom of the doors. They are painted different colors, so it's nice to have them separate. Here are two more air intake ducts. Right above that is our door panels. And lastly, we have this skid plate front diffuser thing. Not really sure what that piece is called. Next up we have the metallic sprue, which is pretty bare because all the pieces are missing were for the engine. The pieces left behind are the two coolant tanks. We have the uprights for the rear suspension, the front and rear spindles. The FXX kit came with this exact same sprue, just all on its own. It had a sprue with just two of the rear rotors. Those two were singled out because on the street car here, it's got the parking brakes built into them. The FXX did not have parking brakes, being a race car. Doesn't really need them. And lastly, we have the external reservoirs for the rear shocks. Also, just banging around at the bottom of the box, I got just two pieces. This one being the rear engine cradle, which I've cleaned up and painted, followed by the intake for the engine. Now, if I remember right, I cut this one out, cleaned it up, because I was just about to do a template for the carbon fiber, and then, well, you know. Now, just like the engine sprue, what's missing here are the pieces that make up the exhaust. Outside of that, we got this huge muffler, we got some pedals. Below that are the wheels, which are staggered, of course. The rear tires on these things are massive. There's something like 345 35s if I remember right. They're about 14 inches wide. To round off the sprue, we got the exhaust tips and the center caps for the wheels. So I never noticed before, but Tamiya did a rather bad job chroming these. I'm going to have to touch all that up with some Alclad. Now in the tire bag, we got three other little baggies. The polycaps, a bag of screws. Now on the FXX, these threw me for a loop. These actually screw into the rear deck piece, the rear bonnet, and it acts as the hinge. Weird, I know. We got some screen that we're not going to use, and some beautiful, beautiful Tamiya tires. Remember on the last sprue I had mentioned how they were staggered? Well, the rears are not only wider, but they're also taller. So I'll be honest, this is the first time I've seen these, so I'm kind of peeking around the camera to get a real good look at them. So let's zoom in and show you exactly what I'm looking at here. These are actually branded. It's hard to tell, but they are Bridgestone Potenza tires. And last but not least, we have our clear parts. The rear bonnet has these two little pins on it that helps it locate on the rear bonnet. Now even after masking and painting the black edge, they are still a little bit visible. Now take note, it's got all the lenses for the side markers, which is weird. I'll get to that later. And speaking of weird, for whatever reason, this is in the same bag as the rear diffuser and the cover for the coolant bypass, and that little vent that goes right there. Why they're in the same bag, I don't know. I'm going to protect the clear parts and just leave it all in that bag and just set it off very gently to the side. Anywho, why they gave us extra side marker lenses is beyond me, because they gave us some pre-tinted side markers and taillights. Now, taillights kind of weird. They got the center section here, and then the tops, they're like a cowl or something that goes over them and kind of encloses them. Now you'll see what I'm talking about when it comes time to install these, but I will say that Revell got it right on the 458 Italia kit. These should be one piece. It's nice having them pre-tinted though. I wish Tamiya still did this with their modern kits. Now you guys should know me by now. If the aftermarket has any support in photo etch or detail sets, I will be using those parts to make the kit stand out. Now, aside of the photo etch to replace all the screens and grills, the Tamiya branded detail set also came with some metal transfers. Now the little notch there missing, those were the little Ferrari script emblems that go on the coil covers for the engine. Now this kit comes pre-masked with some bare metal foil. The kit calls for various spots to be painted in silver for heat reflection. That goes one step further and just gives you some bare metal foil. Now included with the actual kit is some window masking. That was not part of the detail set. As I was saying, these silver parts right here that the kit calls for to be painted silver, that is just these pieces right here. So I'm going to go through all this real quick just to kind of show you what the detail set encompasses. Now I don't normally do seat builds because no matter what you do, they still look kind of toy-like. But I think I'm going to give it a go on this kit. Oh yeah, suddenly remembered why I bought the Tamiya detail set. It's for these parts right here. It uses real metal tubing to simulate a very convincing tailpipe. Now before that though, I could never find one of the hobby design detail sets, so I kind of settled for this crazy modeler detail kit. And as the name implies, it is crazy detailed. Now it's got all the stuff I need to make some metal rotors just like on the F40. It's got some fans. It's got some pieces to recreate some of the rear suspension parts that the kit just does not have, as well as some parts to actually rebuild them and make the kit once better. It also came with these, which I really like. If you look at the real car, this is what the heat shielding looks like. It's not just smooth bare metal foil. It's actually got a texture to it. The crazy modeler kit nailed it and recreated it perfectly. It looks just like the stuff on the real car. Now to go on with the crazy, we got a lot more. We got buckles, we got rivets, we got nut heads, we got all kinds of stuff. To just anything that's metal on a car, it's recreated. We also got the same mesh and screens and grill covers that the Tamiya kit had. It's just kind of more packed together. So I'm going to go through their instruction kit here just to let you know kind of what I'm in for. Now the discs, I'm kind of excited about them. They just bend the vanes up instead of just relying on a bunch of stacked pieces like the hobby design kit. Probably won't be as sturdy, but it'll be a hell of a lot lighter. And lastly, we just have the kit decals. Not a lot of branding on this car. And I kind of just had a sudden realization here that piece, I thought originally was just a bunch of washers. But no, it's the little kick panel thing that goes in a passenger side footwell. Now, onto the kit instructions. There are 16 pages here. This is a big book. I'm going to go through all the steps here to let you know what we're in for, as well as what you missed. Starting with the engine. Now these headers, despite being just a bunch of random tubes, they actually went together very well. They are keyed, so they can only be assembled just one way and one way only. You guys do have to use Tamiya brand tape, otherwise you'll void the manufacturer warranty on your car. It's those weird little pieces I was talking about earlier that I was making a big deal about. Now, I mentioned the rear fenders earlier and how they require a lot of masking. This little photo right here is to scale with the actual part. So there's a template right there, use it. There's another little area that you guys won't get to see since I already glued in the snorkels and that front nose piece. You remember earlier how I was talking about these screws and how they act as the hinge for the rear bonnet? So yeah, that's it. Now, being that I've already built the FXX, and this is being a Tamiya kit, I don't expect any problems. Some of you also may have noticed there's some changes here. This is my new work area. It's just a regular folding table. And I'm gonna flip around on my chair right here. This will eventually be my paint booth right next to the furnace, so when it kicks on, all the fumes will catch the house on fire. Not quite set up so far. All I've really done is hang the light, so still got a bit of setup to go before I actually get into the build. So I am super excited about this build. It's something I've just put off for too long, and I am ready to jump into it. So stay tuned, guys, because it's finally happening.